Hey Peter.
Hi, Henry. How's it going?
Good, how are you?
Awesome. Awesome.
Well, thank you very much for taking the time to talk. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. My pleasure. I just did a couple of interviews with Dial the Gate. So hopefully sorry if I'm plugging other
No, no,
podcasts
no,
here.
you're good.
So hopefully I'm a bit warmed up and I'll be able to sort of provide some interesting information for you guys.
Yeah. Um, how was it that you got started in your career? Was art direction something that you had always leaned towards? Did you stumble into it? How did you get here?
So I got your thanks for sending me the questions. I just got your crib sheet up here and just sort of popping it up. So so my sort of path, I guess, into art direction was, I think it was a little bit circuitous. Often happens for a lot of these things. I came from a very traditional kind of background in Alberta, I guess, which you would call sort of the Great Plains. And I actually was I was a banker. I worked for a large bank for several years. And during that time, I was always, in my spare time, I was always drawing and designing things. And after a few years, I decided I need to think about really what I really wanted to do. And so I guess I was in the bank a couple of years and I applied to architecture school. And so I got into architecture school. And then I worked as an architectural designer for several years. I was in Berlin for a few years. That was absolutely fantastic. And when I came back to Vancouver, I found that architecture was not as engaging as I kind of hoped it would be. Very, very technical and quite a bit. It's a long time before you get to do anything interesting. And a very good friend of mine, Brian Whitred, who is he's a cameraman, director of photography. He sort of said to me, you should really look at working in film. So so I thought I'd give it a try. 4 months, 5 months tops, I can go back to architecture. And so I started on there was a Al Pacino and Robin Williams feature, Insomnia. And yeah, at 35 years old, I was making photocopies, getting coffees. I was an art department assistant. That's how you get in. And I was like, okay, I know, getting film developed. That's how it was the early 2000s. And I was like, okay, we'll give this a few months. We'll see how it goes. And then one day I came into work early as I always do, and there was the production designer Nathan Crowley, who went on to do great things. Dark Knight, Tenet, stuff like amazingly capable and talented individual. And he worked with models. That was his way of kind of communicating his ideas, getting people to kind of on board about what his vision was. And so he was building this giant sort of landscape model of this kind of key scene, and very loose. This isn't something that's going to ever be in front of the camera. This is a tool for kind of communicating ideas, getting people excited, maybe loosening up the pocketbooks. And I could see he was just stressed to get this thing ready for this meeting with the executives. And I'm like, because that was a big part of my life in architecture school and as an architect was building models. And it's also something I like to do kind of in my spare time. I like to, build plastic models. It's quite different than models for film, which are, I guess really more kind of maquettes. They're like sketches. And so I started doing the models for Insomnia. We did the lake house and the boathouse and all these kind of and that sort of and I did these kind of fully realized landscape texture color models, and that's sort of what I was got known for. And so moving forward, I built a lot of models for different shows, and that in conjunction with being a set designer. So coming from architecture, I had drafting. I had hand drafting and computer 3D drafting and 3D modeling. So those kind of three things kind of work together to kind of keep me employed while I sort of was, building getting my name known in film. I
How?
can actually,
Oh no,
I can
yeah,
actually
yeah,
show if you have uh, you're able to show, I can actually show you an example of some models that I've built if that's interesting to you.
yeah, yeah. Please.
Okay, here we go here. Let's go to, now then, how do we, let's see it here, share. Oh, you're gonna have to, I'm gonna send you a request to
Okay,
share screen.
got it.
Okay. Okay, so here we are. So here's my screen. So I'm just randomly, I'm going to pick something here.
Okay.
So this is Seventh Son. This is
Oh, cool.
a show with directed by very, very famous Dante Ferretti, very, very famous Italian production designer. And this is an example of the kind of models that I was building for that show.
Wow, that's
So we
really
had,
cool.
let's see here if I can, let's see. There we go. So
Okay.
this is, I think this is Pendle City. So this is, so in a situation like this, set design, Dante would design the model, and then set designers and art directors would create the drawings, and then I would take the drawings and use them to build kind of the model. You can see there's a kind of a well. It was kind of a central part of the
Yeah.
story. And this is a dye this is inspired by kind of a sort of a dye workshop, that outdoor dye workshop, fabric dyeing workshop that you would have in India. And there's kind of the you can see it's actually quite, he designed something quite abstract in plan, but once you get it in down into person, down, once you get the camera down, you can see how it sort of really kind of tells the story.
Yeah, for
And
sure.
let's see what other stuff we have here. I think that might shipwrecked. Let's see, shipwrecked here. Oh, that's not it. Okay, so there. So we can. I can turn off the stop sharing now.
There we go. Yeah,
So
pretty.
that's an example of. That's how I earned my daily bread for many years.
And so then is that the role of like a set designer? Like what role were you when you were
I was
designing
a
this?
set designer in that
Okay.
role.
Okay.
So model building is a little bit of a, it can slot into a number of. I think for Seventh Son, I might have been assistant art director. I think I was probably assistant art director for that. So model building has a different sort of, it can slide around depending on how important, like on how significant it is to the production. Nowadays, if I was to, I guess, for example, when I was working on Star Trek, we actually had a dedicated model builder who would 3D print the sort of crashed spaceship pieces, and the kind of, he would take the 3D models from the set designers, 3D print them, and then we would take these, and then we would do our wrecking and bend, heating with a lighter, and stretching and cutting, and going at it with a rasp, and then we would carve by hand the landscape of the where the sort of the impact was, and that's kind of really sort of how things are sort of happening with model building now, is that because there's so much, the set designers almost universally now are building some things in 3D before we actually do the 2D drawings. You can then take that information and use it to create 3D printed or 5-axis head milled models, and then you can add sort of texture and life to these models in the way. If you notice with the Seventh Son model, it's just basically printed drawings mounted on foam core. And you still can, you layer the foam core, you still get a, fair bit of life to it. But with, something like, for example, Atom Project, a lot of the models of the spaceships, because the intricacy of how a spaceship is sort of designed, A lot of the the armatures and the ribs, all that would be 3D printed, and then the very kind of simple kind of outside we can sort of cut out of paper or foam or plastic. And so you end up very much with this kind of almost like a hybrid sort of, you're designing your own model kits if you've
Mm.
ever built a model kit, which was a big thing in my generation. And so then what you're doing is you're taking the data, the raw data of the set designers, and you're using it in kind of multiple ways. And what can often happen is we will build these models in 3D, and if everyone's happy, hey, this is looking good, this is working, the proportions, the size, the height, the rotate, whatever, we can then take that same information and then send it to vendors, or sometimes we'll have, tool beds in house, and we can then take the exact same information and create the same things full size.
One project or recent project that I really wanted to ask you about is Shogun, which is
Yeah,
this epic samurai series.
epic.
Yeah, and
Epic.
it's swept the Emmys and was just this unexpected, just massive success. And so what was it like going on to that project? Because again, it is so big and it's very historical, of course. It seems to me very, very detailed and as well
Very
researched as
detailed and very
yeah.
authentic.
So what was it like getting onto that project and like just getting kind of your feet wet with everything?
So first of all, getting onto that project, I really didn't know what I was getting myself into. Because the original Shogun was, I mean, it was a epic. I remember it as a kid, epic program, but it was very much of its day. It was very much kind of its time. And the Shogun that you've seen now is kind of a um, really sort of deep reimagining of the story, where it's almost you're taking the James Clavell story, but you're retelling it in a way that is able to kind of peel back some of the whys. Like, there's so much of this ancient Japanese culture that is very alien, and it's very sort of opaque. And instead of trying to kind of do a sort of an explainer, what they did is that they were telling the story from the point of view of the women of the Sengoku Japan. So it really kind of, because in the James Clavell novel, the women had these, seemingly horrible lives, and the kind of general sort of timbre of the Clavell of the way it was like, oh, what me,
Hmm.
what a hard life we have. And there's no kind of digging into like how do people manage in such such a kind of a strict society? How do you manage in such a strict society where literally at any moment you can get your head cut off, right? And no one's, and that's just how it is. And so I got onto that show, and I didn't know what to expect. I read the novel again, and then I read the scripts, and I was gradually starting to realize how kind of uh, how well done it was. Like how, it was this incredible combination of really like beautiful language, beautiful dialogue, most of it in Japanese. Um, Beautiful kind of very specific body positioning. Body positioning is very much, the way you move is very much part of that ancient Japanese culture. And so you had this kind of physical and literary poetry and graphic violence, and it was just brought together in really kind of successful way. And it was for the production, it was at the beginning of, it was just after the COVID lockdown. So there's a lot of restrictions. So what we had done is the decision that was made was to have a mostly North American crew, because, we were kind of here already, but with working kind of hand in hand with Japanese consultants. So we had from the University of Kyoto. We had an expert on Sengoku Japan culture and all things Sengoku. We had a movement, a shosa, the traditional movement consultant. You see these very sort of slow and deliberate moves and the way people kind of move through space in these Japanese scenes. There is an incredible amount of like physical core strength that goes into moving like that. It looks it looks sort of quite simple, but to actually do it properly requires an incredible amount of sort of core physical strength. There was a samurai consultant, so the way that samurais move, and I do martial arts with my sons, and I have for years I trying to get my feet movements the way these guys do. It was unbelievable. And then we had a Japanese garden consultant and a filmmaking consultant. And so what happened was you ended up with this kind of situation where basically I was given this kind of university level education in order to do my job.
Mm.
And yet we didn't get it right the first time. So we one of the things about sort of the traditional Japanese design is that it is absolutely inseparable from the culture, from the way people move, the way they eat, the way they think about the world, and all these things work together. And if you miss something, it creates unforeseen problems. Classic, one of the early examples, we had just finished Blackthorn's house, and we thought it looked great. We thought it looked great. And then there came the key scene where the helper, the servant opens the shoji screen for Blackthorn, and there's a very particular way to open a shoji because these are I've got some shoji screens right here, so there's no sound separation and there's no knocking, right, and there's no slant, anything like that. So to sort of open the door without surprising you sort of kneel down in that sort of very specific way. You then take with two hands, you sort of open the door just 2 inches, just to make that sound enough to let the people inside know that someone's about to open the door and they can, whatever it is, stop whatever they're doing. They have some time to respond. And then there's a small inset handle where you then open this. So it's like a 3-step process to open this screen, and it's beautiful to watch, and it's culturally significant because it allows people to live in these spaces where there's no sound separation. Well, we were in a hurry. We're like, what are these? We don't need those. We got clocks ticking. So we built the house, put in the screens. They're shooting the scene, and I am, somewhere I'm offset with some of the other crew members. We're all kind of, I think this might have been day one of shooting, and we're just like all, patting ourselves on the back. And it's like, Peter, come to set. And when they ask for the art director to come to set, it's, it can go both ways. Quite often it can be, hey, an attaboy. Other times it's like, where's that thing? And this was one of those where's that thing moments. And I was like, where's this little handle? Say, oh yeah, we ran out of time. It's like, no. And then the Aikiko, who was our Shosa movement advisor, then demonstrated the proper way to open a shoji screen, with the kneeling down in that very kind of fluid, beautiful way, the two hands sliding, and then going up and grabbing that little handle that wasn't there. So we got through it that day with a small nail, and then we went but it was at that moment, that really the light went off for me. And it was like, this is a living culture that's ancient, but also known, but also completely alien. It's like, I remember working on like science fiction shows, and we're like, what would the alien cutlery look like? What would the alien table and chairs look like? Oh, we got to think of it. And this, you want to talk aliens, like what table and chairs, what cutlery? When you eat on the floor, like, the floor is the table, and that sort of leads to this kind of culture of sort of extreme cleanliness and there's no tables when you're in kind of banquets. And that was like another sort of, realizing just how kind of outside of normal kind of modern experience this Sengoku Japan was. So from that moment, I took careful notes. I'd already been, quite attentive and sort of engaged with what, the kind of the consultants had been doing for us. But it was at that moment that I really sort of it hammered home this idea that the movement and the food and the dress and is everything informs. Like I never actually had an architectural consultant. I didn't have anyone there telling me how to design Japanese style architecture. So we had books. But what we had was we had the historical consultant, the movement consultant, the food consultant, the garden consultant, the tea. You put all those together, and everything is you understand kind of the reason of why things are the way they are if you're paying attention. And so I really took that to heart, and I felt like I had been, it was the hardest show I'd probably ever worked on. It was incredibly, incredibly challenging because in film, cool trumps real every time, right? That's kind of how, that's, generally. But this isn't a world where, we could go, yeah, we know, but we think, doesn't it work better? It's like, no, we have to, there's the design authentic tropes that are, kind of set in stone. But within that, that's when you bring your sort of your creative sort of talents and your creative gifts. One of the things that I brought to Shoguns, so we had three art directors. One was in charge of the boats. One was in charge of kind of the stages and Osaka, and I was in charge of kind of rural Japan. So there was the fishing village, the samurai village, which were kind of the same village, a different sort of, but they were completely different locations. And then kind of the battlefields and the all the things that were happening, sort of, the Toranaga's army camps, all that kind of in the remote, out not in the city. That was sort of that kind of fell to me. And so we really struggled for the design of the Japanese village, and our production designer Helen Jarvis was really this incredibly sort of capable and insightful and brilliant person. And so she would spend like a Saturday, like 6 hour Zoom on a Saturday with our historical consultant from Kyoto. And basically, we'd send him drawings and here's what we're doing. And he would just, oh, nope, 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 nope. And we just had to kind of, and things that, nowadays, you've things that you just because you see it in the internet doesn't mean you necessarily understand it. So one of the key sort of things about a Japanese house was that I'm sorry, I just have to
Huh, you're good.
turn off my notifications here. I got
You're good.
my neighbors asking to borrow something, probably my lawnmower. Um, so you've got these sort of layers of kind of what are the just because something is beautiful doesn't mean you necessarily understand the purpose of it. And the biggest sort of tripping or the biggest stumbling block for us at the beginning was, and it worked its way even into the scripts, is the idea of what the kind of these raised verandas were. They look to a Western eye, to a modern eye, that these could be the entrance and exits to the house, but in fact, they're not. What they actually are is they're a platform from which you view your garden. And it's like a place of meditative. It's this kind of it's this kind of this space that's neither inside nor outside. It's both. And so you have when you're in these raised verandas, uh, you're not actually supposed to be in the you're not using it to go in and out of the house, right? And so we had to sort of when we were designing Blackthorn's house and Omi's house, we really had to sort of kind of create this sort of separation of the entrance and these sort of raised platforms kind of looking into the gardens in very, very limited space because we were all kind of crowded into this to this location. And we were able to do it. And we were able to do it because we had sort of all this kind of sort of input from our Japanese Japanese team members. That's
So was the experience on that where the with the door, was that probably the biggest learning lesson from that whole experience in terms of now, because that was that early on in the
that was really early on. That was
okay.
really early on. I wouldn't say that was the biggest lesson, but that was the most significant moment of, oh, I see what's going on. That
Hmm.
was where I really understood kind of this incredible sort of absolutely intricate interlacing of kind of all the aspects of the culture.
Hmm.
So there's food, movement, um, you know, manners, all that stuff all comes together and is part of the way these the houses are designed.
Then with because we have about I think about 20, 15, 20 minutes for a different project like the 50 Shades films, which are entirely different, huge films though.
Entirely different.
No samurais in that one, but very modern, clean, sleek kind of look to those films. What's the process of like doing a film set in this day and age as opposed to, a samurai series?
Well, I think so. In Shogun, I was dealing with, so we had a very kind of clear separation of, so in the city, all the finishes were very refined, very kind of smooth and polished, and there's silk and there's and well, my stuff, we were the country gentry, so everything was kind of rougher and more sort of less refined. So I think for 50 Shades, I think the key difference there is what is the story you're trying to tell. And in 50 Shades, the story that we were telling was this world of luxury, uh, but not kind of gaudy opulence. So you're trying to sort of these are rich, affluent people that that have buy very beautiful things. And so in our modern world, the beautiful things are they're well made, they're smooth, they're well polished. My role, so for 50 Shades, the production designer Nelson Coates, a friend of mine, is just incredibly engaging and interesting guy, and just he was all over kind of he went on to do Crazy Rich Asians, right? So he is all over this world, and so he was very, very intent on kind of bringing this world kind of some kind of coherence. So it's not just kind of there's another fancy thing. Oh, there's another thing. It all had to kind of work together. And so what he did with 50 Shades is he basically uh, left me in charge of the sailboats. That was my sort of I was art director on 50 Shades, and my world was the sailboats, and that's where I was. Um, everything was sort of I built it all 3D, and then I rendered it as well 3D, and then that from that we created the drawings and built the sets. So for something like a sailboat or an airplane, the way it works in film is you shoot your establishers and your entrances and exits on a real on the real deal, whether it's the boat or the airplane, and then when you step inside, that's a set because there's no way you can get your camera crew inside those small spaces. And there's a little bit of a cheat that goes on where you sort of, the interior is about 10 to 15% bigger than it would actually be on the boat. And that was a lot of fun. I would say it was significantly easier because in our kind of consumer world, we the sailboat. on 50 Shades. Cowrie, I can't remember the name, but it was like the first super yacht from like the 80s or 90s. And so it's fabulously beautiful and, by super yacht standards, fairly traditional. Nowadays you get super yachts that look like shopping malls inside. But it actually had this very kind of yacht-like appearance outside and also details on the inside. So we used those cues. We had made sure our windows were roughly about the same size. We made sure the wood was roughly the same color. But after that, we just like, let's go. And so that's in some ways that's easier. In some ways it's harder because you have to, um, there isn't a kind of a roadmap. So you got to make sure that what you're doing is effectively telling the story that the writers and the producers and the production designer want to tell. I may have see if I have some 50 Shades things here. I got let's try. Okay, let's see here. Oh, I don't have it all set up here, so I'll have to.
Oh, no worries.
But that was so 50 Shades was a lot of fun because I was able to use I did all the because the models were so complex. I did them in I did them in I guess I did them in SketchUp. Let's see if I can find it this way here. Let's see. Okay, sorry, I'm not gonna take up any more of our time.
No, you're good. You're good.
So let's see. Let's try something else here. I know how to do this. Okay, so I'm going to go to my website and then I'm going to, can I share the screen again?
Oh yeah.
Okay, let's do this here. So,
Okay.
okay, so for those of you following along at home, this is my website, automatic250.com, named after my favorite Polaroid camera from when I was in architecture school. And so this is, here we go, 50 Shades Darker. So this is an example of, uh, so here's the actual, so there's the sailboat. So that's the actual set. So you can see that it's got that kind of traditional kind of nautical feel with the cock, the wood deck with the caulking in between, but then it's got the modern elements with kind of the dividing lines there. And that's the 3D model that I had built. So you
Oh,
can see that, all the elements are there. It's just we sort of, breathe a little more life into it in the actual and there's the and there's the that's the set
oh, cool.
in SketchUp before we did all the drawings.
Wow.
So there is the entry, and and there it is in sort of in 3D.
Yeah.
So what happens with sort of set designing, art directing, that kind of crossover is you really want to sort of give a fair kind of idea to the people who are writing the checks of that what they're asking for and what you're showing them is what they're going to get.
Mm.
And if you can make it better than what you've drawn, then I think then you're ahead of the game.
It's interesting with you talking about how the Shogun series, because it's historical, you have all this reference, but then with a modern film, it's like you're sort of saying it's sort of open-ended. There's not necessarily a wrong way to design this because you're not having to reference a historical piece of or a historical setting in a way. I mean, obviously there's certain accuracies and technical things you have to get right, but it's sort of to me it seems like different approaches.
Different, yes, not as different as one would suppose. More as an idea about what the starting point is. So for like 50 Shades, so Nelson, the production designer, will create a mood board. He will put together a specific list of this is what this ship is going to be. This is our inspiration. We're going to use this boat. We're going to use these finishes. It's going to be like this. And then the executives will either say yes or no, and we'll go back to the drawing board. We'll start again. And it's and that sort of and that's a big job for a production designer is to you know kind of read the mind or kind of look inside kind of what is the ask behind the question, what are they looking for. I've been on shows where we've got it wrong, where we designed everything and it looked like it was like this set was fantastic and it had this like board form concrete Planet of the Apes. It was incredible, and we were so proud. And they represented it to the network, and they're like, "Oh, we thought it was going to look like Salem in the 18th century." And we're like, "No." That was brutal. Oh my
Yeah.
God.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's the open-ended. You really need to at the very beginning of the project. You need to sort of get a sense of, you pitch ideas. It's like, how about this? With And that's where it was a little bit different with Shogun, is because we know what the aesthetic is, but then it's like, how are these things composed? Like how are these things brought together? Like I said, Helen designed this amazing, she had this, the village, in a traditional Japanese, Sengoku village, it's basically one street. And then you have a gate on either end, and that's how. Because basically, Sengoku Japan was it was a warring. It was like blood feuds, and one of the reasons why the women are all trained in the use of the naginata is who's protecting the village when all the men have been far off fighting or have been. So you got the men kind of killing themselves. Someone's got to
Mm.
keep the shop open. And so it was a particular way of, and that absolutely would not work for filming. So we had to kind of, and it's a lot of back and forth, a lot of back and forth with the consultants, where we had to sort of look at other ways of that villages were laid out, aside from this kind of single street with the gate on either side. And we were able to kind of find that kind of mix where it has to it's authentic, it has to be authentic for Shogun, but it's not a theme park. It's actually a TV show that has to be entertaining, and it has to be understandable. Sometimes if we're doing these things and you can't actually get the camera where it needs to be, you're not going to be able to tell the story. So some compromises were made for the in the interest of kind of telling the story.
Right.
And one more, I
Oh,
would
oh,
say,
oh
oh,
yeah, yeah, go for it.
you asked what was the greatest learning sort of element for me. And I would say it was the design of a Japanese garden,
Mm.
how the elements that go into, and again, first time they're like, because Vancouver is a lot of Asian influence in Vancouver, but not Japanese. So my first pass at this Japanese garden it was looking quite like the Chinese gardens that I was familiar with. The Sun Yat-sen Garden here in Vancouver, the gardens that I had visited in Hangzhou and Suzhou when I was studying in China, and these guys were like, "Dude, no." And so working with the garden consultant, we were able to sort of, we books and critiques, we were able to kind of create these gardens that were Japanese and not anything else.
Yeah. Well, Peter, I don't want to get cut off, but thank you so much for all that you've shared. I feel like I had no idea all that, went into this, and I would love to have you on again sometime soon. But your work is so integral, and the movies and TV shows you've been a part of are so, I mean, I love them, and I really appreciate the work you do, and thank you for taking the time.
Thank you, Henry. And yeah, I'd be happy to come on again and for the young folks at home, talk more about